许一分多一少，墨色手又在告你光似老。你似血雨而来的解药，天不凡尘却是的心跳。我与人间一笑，有花自一袅袅，似梦绕花里花外扫寂寥。你是不是野火的斜阳，无风闲乱相交的窈窕，题画誓言难描，全顾此不干扰，花等着墨香离色正妙。交融调的色调，惊艳的刚好，你我并的正巧，烈焰如一秒，自身飘不闪耀，无需一分多一少，墨色手又在告你光似老。你似血雨而来的解药，天不凡尘却是的心跳。我与人间一笑，如花自一袅袅，似梦绕花里花外扫寂寥。你是不是野火的斜阳，无风闲乱相交的窈窕，题画誓言难描，全顾此不干扰，花等着墨香离色正妙。
Good morning, people. I hope this video finds you well. Today, I want to talk a little bit about geopolitics and what we have learned, all of us, after the events of February, March, and April 2022. In a way, the worm has turned. The world has reached a new consensus. Maybe if you're in an echo chamber, you're unaware of this, but the world isn't. And what is the big understanding? The big understanding is that the idea of what the world is all a fake charade. There is no such thing as an independent France, a nationalistic independent Germany, a free and independent Australia. The nation of Japan doesn't exist. The nation of Poland doesn't exist. All these nations that we look at on a globe and look at on a map that we consider to be that, well, that's Japan, and that's Australia, and that's France, is all an illusion. They're all American property. America The nation, the federal government in America, owns those nations just like it owns American states. Oh, sure, they're allowed to have their own flag, just like Georgia has its own flag, and Texas has its own flag, and West Virginia has its own flag. And sure, they're allowed to have their own language, just like people in Louisiana are allowed to speak Cajun French, and people in Maine have their own unique accents. And they're all allowed to have their own individual histories, just like American states do. But as far as independent nations, no, they're not independent nations. If America tells them to shit, they say, "Where do you want it, sir?" If America tells them, "You will buy this," they buy it. If America says, "You will fight them," they fight it. The American military owns those nations. They all are trained in American military. They all use American military equipment. They have resources so that American military equipment can be cross-pollinated, shipped over there, and just troops can be sent over there to those locations. Every single one of those nations are part of the United States Hydra. The unipolar nation, the singular nation in charge of it all, the one ring to rule it all and control everybody else. That's what those nations are. And these nations, so controlled, will go against their own best interest because the United States government told them to. And if you don't obey, you die. Because the United States won't fight your nation. They'll just kill the leadership. Like that. Two nations are preventing this massive hydra from taking over the globe. And that's Russia and China. And they are super villainized. And alongside that is Iran and India. And those four nations all create a unified bloc known as the East, where the rest of the world seems to want to be part of. So the world you know does not exist. Now that brings us up to some other interesting situations, one of which is the Ukraine. We've learned in the Ukraine that it sure as hell calls itself Ukraine, but it isn't. It's also a member of the American Hydra. It's a member of NATO. There's NATO forces inside Ukraine fighting Russians, using NATO equipment, using NATO tactics, being directed by NATO generals, which are all happen to be American and British. Brings up the question of Taiwan. There is no doubt in my mind that Taiwan is part of the American Hydra. It's been that way since 2014, and China is going to do something about it. Might just be necessary for China just to nuke the entire nation, start from scratch. People don't seem to understand how close Taiwan is and how small it is relative to China. The idea that America will come inside and do something about it is as ridiculous as me growing wings and flying. So the major geopolitical brain explosion was the idea that all we have taught is false. That Washington, D.C. controls Europe and controls Australia and Japan. Completely and absolutely. And you may not want to hear it. You may not like it. You may want to believe that they're independent because they have their own individual quirks. But having localized meat pies or a fetish for KTV and cute girls in dresses, as in Japan, does not make you an independent nation. So many things that we have assumed existed are no longer true, and it is out in the open. We see all of this. Those of us who know geography, those of us who know history, those of us who know geopolitics are horrified by this realization. And that means that there are structures in place that we did not assume before. And these structures that are in place will define what will happen in the next 5 years. So all of you who are believing in your calculus that China is independent, it's not. It's China, Russia, India, Iran together as a cluster. And thinking that Poland and Germany and France are all independent. It's not. It's America. Now have to wake up, smell the coffee, and smell the bacon. The world has fractured. There is an east and a west, and that, my friends, is the way things are today. I was concerned, thinking that perhaps I am the lone voice, and I'm the lone person who understands and recognizes this. But I asked a couple of my Chinese friends what's going on in the Chinese media, and they too all recognize the fact, because it's well known throughout China, that Europe is a puppet of the United States. And it's more than a puppet, it is the United States. The only thing that most of my Chinese friends don't want to face is the idea that America owns Taiwan. They don't want to face that fact, because their brains go tilt, 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 it can't be, it can't be. But I'm afraid that's the situation. That's a complete red line. And as I repeated and said over and over again, China isn't nice like Russia is. Okay? And this little insignificant island that America media is promoting as an independent, freedom-loving democracy is going to be eviscerated and squashed out of necessity. As long as Taiwan sits there able to be under the influence of the United States, it is a dagger pointed into the belly of China, and China will not accept it. Just like Finland or the Ukraine being part of NATO, Russia will not accept it. But you know, There's no way around it. The United States is being run by fucking idiots. They're fucking idiots. I mean, really, on a scale from 1 to 10, on the idiot scale, with 10 being the highest point of being an idiot, the United States is at 15. These people are brain dead, drug addicts, psychopaths with strong sociopathic tendencies on top of bipolar schizophrenia. They are fucking lunatics. And they don't give a rat's damn about anybody else except themselves. So the best thing that the rest of the world should do is clean them all out like you would clean out a rat's nest. I'm talking about the leadership. I'm not talking about the population. Clean out the leadership. Russia's prepared to do that. Now, the United States is the media is on full-blown hysteria. If you read the Western American media, you're thinking, well, Putin's made all these terrible calculations. Nobody knows what the fuck Putin was calculating. How dare you have the pompous belief that you know what Putin's doing? And how dare you treat Russia as an isolated entity? Shows how much you fucking know. Russia's doing quite well, thank you. The big concern, of course, is the bioweapons. But, you know, there's reasons why China is so anal about this virus thing. That's why I'm doing testing every day. That's why anytime there's an outbreak of anything, the area is locked down. Because China is fully aware of the bioweapon issue. China does tit for tat. America tried to induce famine in China. Well, welcome guys. Welcome for the tit for tat response, because you're going to start seeing what America tried to do in China but couldn't. But China willed it back. That's what's going to happen. And it's not going to be, well, McDonald's is out of fries kind of. That's not a famine. A famine is there's no potatoes in the state. That's a famine. It's pretty bad, guys. I hope it doesn't happen. I got friends and family out west, but what you gonna do? You know, you look at Biden, the President Biden, or President Trump, former President Trump. You guys elected him. You elected these guys. Tells you the state of the mind of the United States, huh? You'd think they'd probably get somebody else. Why not? Well, it's because you guys didn't have the opportunity to have somebody else. These are the puppets that the oligarchs place in front of you to sing and dance and look official, make official proclamations. People ask me, what's going to happen in the future? I don't know. You know, I'm connected through Majestic to the domain commander. That's functional. I'm going to have that until I die. And then afterwards, too. But I'm always, when I ask these questions, I'm always told not to worry about it. Things are proceeding as they should be, and everything's in hand. Sometimes I think it's a little pedantic, you know, because I want some hard intel, something I can tell you all guys to work with. But I can tell you what I've been told, and I was told that President Biden and the entire administration are not decision capable, meaning that if they had, if the domain had a walk-in or a walk-through or a pass-through, it would be meaningless because they are not the ones making the decisions. They're not the ones in control. I didn't understand it then, now I understand it. So look at what you have. You've got this massive unipolar organization, the United States, which is in control of Europe and Australia and Japan and Switzerland. And looks like Finland too. For a nation that's trying to be, that's had hundreds of years of neutrality, suddenly wanting to jump on board the ship of the United States. Yeah, United States has its tentacles. Money corrupts, absolutely. Nothing like some drugs and sex and money to absolutely take over. Look at Zelensky. You can't tell me he's not on drugs. So what we know is, so you got this big United States that's everywhere, and it's nominally being run by some people who are hidden. We don't know who they are. Organizational committees that are operating in a way that appears to be pure madness, death wish insanity. That is certainly not a healthy situation. That is certainly not a good situation. And that is certainly not a situation that lends itself to peace. How da-
愁绪最鸣笛，怎叹残月照剑影，染风雪吹满衣，饮一腔诗意。我徒手摘星一串，摇尽清欢渡人间，托红颜说思念，偶得一两篇。念君心迷，千百遍热忱，今年再重逢又不敢相认。醉叹世人间起风，人独自黄昏，看暮色沉沉，眼底荒太深，直到是风雪夜归人。醉一世十里春风，人年桃花红，人流言痴真，吹不散两人醉往事，心上伤害。我负愁绪最鸣笛，怎叹残月照剑影，染风雪吹满衣，饮一腔诗意。我徒手摘星一串，摇尽清欢渡人间，托红颜说思念，偶得一两篇。念君心明，千百遍热忱，今年再重逢又不敢相认。醉叹世人间起风，人独自黄昏，看暮色沉沉，眼底荒太深，直到是风雪夜归人。醉一世十里春风，
Sorry about that, guys. I had a interruption at the office. All right. So what do we have here? Well, we have, as I've described, a completely different world. And that is what I've been telling everybody. To understand how you get around in this world, you have to understand what the universe actually is. It's not what you think it is. It's something else. And I described how it's the MWI and how you can navigate through the world lines and all this. And likewise, for us to understand what's next on the agenda on geopolitics, we must recognize that the world in geopolitics and the globe is not what we believed to be the case. Sorry about that, guys. Just some vitamins, some blood pressure pills, and some heart medicine. That's what you have. It's the price you pay when you get to be old like me. Ha ha! So, yeah. So for us to actually understand what's going on in the world, we have to see the world as it is, not as we thought it was. And we all thought it was something else. We thought it was independent countries that were doing things because it was in their interests to do it with the United States. Now we find out that those other countries are not countries. They are the United States. It's like a pig that you put lipstick on and put a dress on and call it a child. It's not. It's still a pig. And the United States is the biggest oinker in the world. And everybody else are oinking quite loudly. The narrative, the anti-Russia narrative and the anti-China narratives are in hysterics. Soon the focus will change. There is a focus. It's a lesser focus, but it's the crazy Chinese are still testing. They're still doing this, and it's causing untold hardships. And America and China is about ready to riot and overcome Xi Jinping and tear down the leadership. Like I said, guys, seriously, they make up a narrative. And then they take events to plug in that narrative. They don't report news, and they certainly don't report truth. That's the way it is. So for us to understand reality as it is, we can then thus understand what the commander's saying. Because I didn't quite understand some of the statements that he was saying. When I asked, why don't you have a walk-in on a Biden? That would be the most logical course of action, right? Just have a walk-in on Biden and President Biden and then stop this nonsense, right? And the commander says it can't do it because Biden is not what I'm thinking it is. He is. It is. It's hard to tell what it is. So, knowing that all of our assumptions about the world is wrong and our assumptions about so many things are wrong, we now know the full extent of the reality in the world. And that puts some of the ways that Russia and China are dealing with these geopolitical events in sharp understanding. For instance, while China will talk with Blinken and will talk with President Biden, that China realizes that no matter what is promised, it's just a lie. So there is zero credibility in anything that the United States says. They also realize the United States is going to continue to act in ways that are detrimental to the well-being of China, and that China has long set up retaliatory systems that at a moment's notice can be implemented. For instance, there's sanctions. You sanction China? Ho, 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 ho. Watch what happens. And yeah, the United States did some sanctions on certain people. But that doesn't matter. They're not leaving China, so who gives a fuck? But you start from the get-go right now, you want to put some economic hardship on China? Well, ho, 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 you wait and see what happens. The idiots, whoever is running, who is behind the curtain in the Wizard of Oz America, think that they know what's going on. They have no idea how intertwined the United States is, how fragile it is. I think the military knows how fragile it is. The military is aware. The people who are in charge of the ABC organizations understand their little realm, but the people who are over the nominal leadership are completely in these isolation bubbles of insanity. And as such, they are predictable. It's easy to predict their actions. And they're following scripts that were laid out, that were appropriate 20 years ago. Not so anymore. And adults in the room, Putin, Xi Jinping, adults, Modi, realizing the situation needs to be addressed while the United States dies, which means that all these proxy nations, we call them proxy nations, but they're all United States, will also die with it. If you are in Poland, Germany, Australia, Japan, you too will also feel some of the death throes. I don't think these proxy nation death throes will be as severe as those inside the mainland United States. I haven't been keeping up on these local news in Australia or Japan, but I can't imagine that anybody in Australia would accept LGBT gay sex teaching education and purple hair and Black Lives Matter hysteria and shadow banning and everything there in those nations. I can't imagine that it would happen. But if it does happen, then you know that the Amerification, the Americacation of those nations is complete. And the reason why I say this is a look at Poland. And Poland is a very traditional Catholic nation. I can't imagine that they would accept LGBT mandates. Now, they may be moving in that direction, but whether they totally accept it, I find that a hard sell. And same thing with Australia. You know, when I went to Australia, and I lived in Australia, they're very, very independent, easygoing, fun-loving, hard-working folk. I can't imagine that they have become fat, obese, riding those little four-wheel scooters to Walmart and having purple hair talking about their freedom. I can't imagine that that's going on in Australia right now. I could be wrong. I don't know, because it's been 20-some years since I've been there. Maybe 30 years. It's been a long time. But so these proxy nations will not be as severe as the changes going on within the internal United States, but they will experience that changes to a lesser degree, more or less. So, if you are in these locations, if you are in Australia, say Perth, or Brisbane, or Adelaide, or Sydney, as nice as they are, I would suggest going to quieter locations. Beautiful. Every place in Australia is beautiful. You can't get away from the beauty of Australia. I mean, really, guys. But try a little quieter place. I'm not talking about the outback, okay? Just a quieter place. Little cooler, too, because Australia in the summers, I mean, seriously, it's hot. Not Zhuhai hot. It's hot! So I would go to a colder place, a cooler place. Like Tasmania, maybe. Or maybe New Zealand. I know it's not Australia, and Australians kind of make fun of the Kiwis, but you know, they try hard to be neutral. And I can't imagine that New Zealand is an American proxy nation. They follow what Australia does, but I don't think they obey the United States so much. That's what I would do, and that's what I recommend. If you're in Europe, say in France, or in Europe, Germany, anywhere, you know, move. If you're in an area, you have to trust your gut feelings. I've had a couple of people ask me. I didn't know where they lived, okay? I just had questions, and I asked the commander. The commander knew exactly who was asking the question and gave answers, and they're going to be, the answer was there will be turmoil, but where they're at is going to be, what was the term? They'll be fine. They'll be fine. They'll just adapt to some changes, but they will be fine. So basically in Europe, there's going to be pockets of very good areas to be. Same thing with all these other nations as the United States goes through its death throes. I get the impression that the leadership in the United States, the people behind the curtains, the Wizard of Oz behind the curtains, okay, are not only crazy psychopathic lunatics on drugs. I think they're old. I think they're very, very old. And when they start dying off, and I think they're past their expiration date, personally, that things will start calming down. So to understand the world, you have to understand as it truly is, and with that, that's my little spiel on the geopolitical situation and the great lessons that we all have learned over the last couple of months, February, March, and April 2022. And if you are totally aware of this, you will find that this little discussion, this little video, has no value to you. But I think to a lot of people who, like me, have been under various assumptions through history and our understanding of the world, it's kind of earth-shattering to us. And at that, guys, please just remember the basics. Always stick to the basics. I always talk about the basics. Please stick to the basics. Be part of a community. Do your best. And at that, guys, I want to end up with my basic words of advice. Be good. Smile. Make a difference in the world that you live in. Be good to dogs, cats. Be helpful. Be the Rufus. Participate. Don't be a spectator. And when the situation calls, take action. And at that, guys, remember,